We've got to tell the unvarnished truth. I was given the opportunity to visit the African American Museum in Smithsonian in D.C. a few months ago. And when you enter the Smithsonian's museum, you see these words, and it made me do some self-reflection as I prepared for this talk. One of the things that made me think about was 6 very brave and fierce women who have really helped me to think about what does it mean to be a black male in America. The first 3 women was Opal, Patrice, and Alicia. 3 brave women who decided to say the words, Black Lives Matter. The other 3 women were my mother, who bore me as a Negro. The other woman was my wife, Jacqueline, who married me as a black, not as an African American. And the third one was my daughter, Rachel, who came into this world as an African American. The one thing about all 3 of those terms is that as a black person or as an African American, you're constantly being labeled in some way, some form, some shape. One thing that I also did this week that was very interesting was I went home, because I had a speaking engagement to do, and I spoke to my brother about my niece in college. And he told me about her experiences are really good. She's in the honors program. She's doing very well as a sophomore. But also, she's experiencing some issues with her roommates. 3 very beautiful young women and her. 3 women are white, and her. She's 5'6", under 130 pounds. And the one thing one of the women said to her was that you scare me because of your voice, and I'm afraid of you, and you're making me more anxious, so could you leave the apartment? Well, so race is always with us in some way, in some form, somehow. One thing, though, about race for me is that I've been on this journey for quite some time since I had my first child, trying to figure out who I am, how I will call my child, what will I do to protect my child or my children now. And one of the things that I have to talk about is myself and where did my own ideas of race come from. When I was a kid, I wanted to be one of the Flintstones and the Brady Bunch. Now, why the hell did this black boy think he could be part of either one of them? I don't know. Because the blackest thing in the Flintstones was Dino with the black spots, and Greg would not take me to the football games with his friends, I'm sure, because there was no black neighbors, and a few cameo appearances happened in the Brady Bunch. So I don't know where that came from, but something in me was saying, I want to be white. My mother never told me that I should be white. She never made it an issue of I should be better than who I am. My mother loved me very dearly. But I do know my mother had her Medea moments when she was on the phone with certain people who were white or Filipino or anything but black. So it came from somewhere in my unconscious that black was not good. And so that's when I started understanding, well, something's going on here. And when I went to high school, I understood black and white space. And when I went to college, I really got to understand what black and white space meant. It wasn't until 1990 when I received this wonderful fellowship from the Kellogg Foundation that said you can travel anywhere in the world that you want to travel. And so I decided, well, the first place I'm going to go is not Disneyland. I'm going to Africa. I'm going to the motherland, because I'm going to see my people, and I'm going to be all good. So I got to go to Tanzania in Africa, and the Kellogg Foundation set it up for us. We were able to meet with many dignitaries when we were there, and one of the dignitaries we met with was Julius Nyerere, who was the first president of Tanzania and prime minister. And while we were having tea, Julius Nyerere asked us about who we were and what we were doing and how was America doing these days. And I said, well, you know, we're now African American. And he looked at me and said, no, you're not. I said, damn. I'm in Africa, and they're telling me I'm not African American. I'm trying to embrace all of this stuff that's African, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. He said to me, you're Black American, and you should be proud of that. You should own the fact that your people who were taken from this place built America. And I had to think about that. I had to think about who am I and why am I taking on this new term that was established in 1988 as to how I was identifying myself when I was pretty comfortable with being black. But now I'm African American, and was making me somewhat schizophrenic, because he said, where did you come from in Africa? And I said, okay, I know my mother is from Accomack, Virginia, and my father's from Pittsburgh, so I don't know what to do here, but I'm going to just go with this. At this point, I'm going to say, I'm a black man who is a descendant of slaves in America. And from that point on, in 1991, I've identified as black. It wasn't until more recently, in 2013, that I went to the United Kingdom. I had received tenure. I was on my first sabbatical. I was a research professor at York University. I thought I was doing it, y'all. I thought like, hey, I made it. But then I was walking at the Scarborough Fair, and I came across Sambo Comes to the UK. I said, what is this? Now, race can be really messy. And I'm going to say, race discussions can be really messy. And more recently, they've been pretty messy. And they've been pretty messy for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is that this person from Milwaukee has decided to do something very special. And because of that, we have decided to now have more of a race discussion. And if you didn't know that, he's from Milwaukee. He's born and raised. He was born here, raised by two white adoptive parents. And so for that reason, he made me think about race even more recently. But then I was called back to this. And I remembered that when I saw this, I was kind of thrown off. And so I went back home from Scarborough, walked along the York streets, and I was walking along in 2013, and I came across a toy store that was selling dolls that looked like this. One of them was 5 feet tall. And I said, nobody's going to believe this, because I'm now all twisted in my feelings, and I need to figure out what to do. But I brought one, and it was called a gollywog. And they're one of the most popular dolls in the UK right now. They used to be more popular almost than the Raggedy Ann doll. And I said, wow, Sambo, it's good to meet you. But it made me think again about how is my race valued? How do we give dignity to my race? How do we decide my humanity? And how do I take care of myself and find peace and justice on the regular basis? Now, as a professor, I have the unique opportunity to teach a class and to have it approved and do what I want to do around the issue of policy. And it was because of that I decided to do my Black Lives Matter class. Black Lives Matter means for me those 3 words, Black Lives Matter. And as I moved forward in teaching that class, I decided we're going to look at the structural issues that affect black people and how black people are treated, how they may be disparately treated around certain policies, and what is it that we can learn from this experience. Now, all of us have our own way of looking at Black Lives Matter, but I decided to look at it not from the movement, but look at it for just what do those words mean if we take a historical look at black people in America. But one thing that helped me get to that point was Abby Neely, who happened to be a person who was the chair of a good friend of mine, he happened to be the chair of her dissertation. And I had dinner in their backyard. It was a lovely dinner. And the one thing that's really unique is white people be knowing stuff. Y'all be having some resources that I just don't have. And they happen to know the person who was teaching this class at Dartmouth on Black Lives Matter. And so we had a very wonderful conversation. She shared her syllabus with me. I looked at other syllabus because there were only a couple at the time. And I moved forward after going through a number of things in my school. I had to get approval of the chair, the dean, the chancellor, because I wanted to be safe in the fact that some of my professor colleagues were having their syllabuses looked at through FOIA requests because of the fact that we're talking about race. So I had to figure out how do I protect my freedom of expression, but also how do I do something that I really love to do. And I love teaching. I love my students. I can't wait to go into class. One, because I want to look sharp, but also because I just love teaching. And I think it's just so much fun to get people who are willing to listen and learn about the fact that there's some knowledge they can take and process. So once I got this approval and I got my information together, my students and I were able to pull together our class. And what we decided to do was go on this journey together of learning, because I didn't know a whole lot. They knew more than me about various things. I knew some things that they didn't know. And so they decided that let's have a Facebook page. And of course, I couldn't do this. Believe me, I couldn't. So they pulled it together. But every week they were required to look at what's going on a daily basis around Black Lives Matter. And over the course of a semester, we found over 350 entries of atrocities or issues that were happening with black people in this country in one semester. All you got to do is read, people. Just read the paper, listen to a podcast. It'll tell you a lot. And so that was one thing we did. The other thing we did was we went through all these various topics that we thought were really important. Some of them they offered, some of them I brought to the class, But we made sure that we were trying to get a whole lot of information in those 15 weeks around what does it mean to be a black person in America, and why does this term Black Lives Matter mean something to us? And once we did that, we also had a very interesting assignment that was done with the help of an artist in residence who I worked with named Kelly Snyder. And what we did there was we looked at also what were artists doing that were really important to us. We were studying what Colin Kaepernick talked about. We looked at Beyonce's Lemonade, and we interrogated it. We found out that Beyonce was not just telling us to get information, but she was talking about womenism and black people and what that meant for them in New Orleans, and what does it mean to be a part of black violence or community violence. We also looked at things like Ava DuVernay's video on 13 and how the government's been involved in some of these issues as well as keeping black people down. And it was some hard truths, and it was a hard class, but it taught us all collectively a lot. Once we looked at all this information, their big project was to put on an art show. And that's what they did. They worked with the artists in residence. They chose their project. I approved it or disapproved it. We worked it out. They had a big paper to do along with their art project. And over a 2-day period for our very first art show, we had 450 people come from the community as well as the university. These two classes of students I had were really helping me to understand what is the narrative and how do we change this narrative to where we can make it better for all of us. The art show required that they do their own marketing, and this is a graphic design of one of the students of how they publicized their art project. The art show itself included all of their artwork as well as some of the artists' work that was part of the project that we worked with. And they found an art gallery to work with us on doing this, and it was on campus. It was one of the biggest joys for them to be able to see their work. They were required to talk about their artwork. They couldn't just stand there and not say anything. They had to be an activist about what they were learning and how they learned it and what it made them feel like. And I had told everyone who came through the door, ask them really hard questions, make them sweat. And they did a wonderful job. I was so excited for my students because they really got what I wanted them to get, is that this is an important issue bigger than someone being shot, because we black people knew that people were being shot in our community. That wasn't unusual. That wasn't something that we didn't know, but we knew that. And I really felt that the students who embraced this project and this class were able to tell other people how you can embrace it as well. The other thing about this class was that they were able to do something for me that I'm always indebted to them for. This is one of the examples of the artwork that they did. And the artwork was that they had 3 different chairs, and they wanted to have what we would call a seat at the table. That was the theme for this year, based on the Solange CD that came out. And they were able to ask any community member or university member to write down what they thought about the term Black Lives Matter. And it was a great experience to get the community involved in all kinds of ways and talk about the issues in that way as well. They also were able to get very significant publications around this particular work. The newspapers came, NPR came. We were just having a great old time with all of this. It was a wonderful experience. At the same time, we had this experience here, where someone decided to deface our work. The posters we put around campus, people were crossing out the word black and said all lives matter. The little pamphlets we passed out on various tables, we saw they were crossed out. People were saying all lives matter. And I want to say to those people, when Black lives matter, all lives matter. That's what we were trying to get you to understand with this conversation we were having at the art shows that we had both times. And we had over in those art shows a total of 700 people showed up to talk about this issue of what does it mean, the term Black Lives Matter. Now, of course, all of this is something that brings a little bit of sorrow to us, but at the same time, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity for me to talk to the students about why what you're doing is important for you to talk to your parents, to your friends, to your relatives, whoever it may be, about what does it mean to be somebody who's in this class and trying to understand what Black lives means. One thing that James Baldwin said in the museum that I went to as well, that I copied down, was that the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us. We all walk around with our own internal history. And within that history is some unconscious control. So when I thought about wanting to be white, it's because unconsciously I was buying into what society was telling me, that white people are better than me. That if I had blonde hair and blue eyes, I might be better off. That if I decide to do this certain thing this way, or live in this neighborhood this way, or this whatever it might have been, that I would have more access. Now, some of that is true. I would have it, but that doesn't mean it's because of who I am. It's because if someone has decided that because of my race, I'm going to be treated differently. I ask everyone in this room to think about, when did you learn about race? When did you know that someone was treated differently because of the race that they bring to this world? And what have you done to maybe stop that? Now, I know for me, what I've tried to do is be honest. I've tried to give my students the best education I could, but I'll always do it within an intersectionality approach of looking at race, gender, and class. The last thing is that I want to say to you is that when we look at this issue of race, I don't want people to go away thinking that racism ends with getting rid of one person. It doesn't. That's what we learned in this class, that racism is an issue that's ingrained in the heritage of our soil and the things that we do on a daily basis in this country. And it requires all of us to be able to say to somebody, when you're with your homies, when you're with your family, to say, that ain't cool when they talk about something that's a racial issue. That ain't cool to do that. So you need to stop that. It's going to be hard because some of those people you love, some of those people you really care about, and you don't want to lose their friendship and the warmth of who they are. But it requires all of us to decide that we have to make a difference by stopping the madness. So as I end this, I want to say to everyone here, you all are activists in your own way. You all control our destiny, and it's not my responsibility to end racism, but it's all of us our responsibility to end racism. Thank you.